between EU's green policies and Russia's supply limitation. The webinar is organized by the Eastern and Southeastern Europe Panel Network. My name is Ana Maria Angelescu, and I'm a PhD candidate at the National University of Political Studies and Public Administration in Bucharest, and I will be the moderator of today's discussions. Before we begin, just a few quick technical announcements. The meeting is recorded and is broadcasted live on our Facebook page, and the attendees can address questions for our panelists through the chat section. Please indicate whether the question is addressed to a specific guest. First of all, let me say a few words about the Eastern and Southeastern Eastern and Southeastern Europe Panel Network. It was launched by Professor Liliana Popescu from SNSPA Bucharest and is a network of women experts in international relations from Eastern and Southeast Europe and from the wider Black Sea region. The network is developed with the support of the university, National University of Political Studies and Public Administration, and co-financed by the German Marshall Fund of the United States, the Black Sea Trust for Regional Cooperation, and implemented with the support of UN Youth Romania and other partners. Thank you for being with us today. I propose that we begin our event, and first I invite Mrs. Otilia to take the floor. Mrs. NUţU is from Romania and is a policy analyst on energy and infrastructure at Expert Forum. She worked as a consultant for the World Bank on public administration reform. She was a EU coordinator for the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum and has substantial experience in the field of energy policy and regulations. Please, Mrs. NUţU, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ana Maria, and it's a pleasure for me to be here among such distinguished panelists and the audience. I'd like to say just a few words in the beginning, and then we'll probably get a more structured discussion from the questions of the audience about why we are here in terms of this current energy crisis that we have in the region. So, as you know, last year, because of the pandemic, the energy demand dropped significantly. And this is why we had very low prices for energy, both for electricity, for oil and for gas, which were at historical lows. What happened this year was that the economies recovered, the demands increased substantially, and we also had in the region a colder spring, which meant that we used up a lot of gas resources from the underground storage in spring. And what happens now is that the supply of energy that we have in general, but also here in the region, is limited compared to a demand that is continuously increasing. So we have a rigid supply of energy and very, let's say, accelerated growth of demand, both for residential uses and for industrial consumption. Of course, what happens now in the winter is the fact that the consumption for heating also increases, so we have a peak demands. And this is what is fueling this continuous increase of gas prices and then of electricity prices. What happened in addition in the region, so what we see is actually not unprecedented. The whole world has experienced increasing energy prices for the past months, but what we see here in the region is also a sort of, we have an additional problem, and that is that Gazprom is also trying to make best use of the current energy crisis to have its way. As you know, Gazprom has been trying for a long time to find a way to completely bypass the Ukrainian transit. And what happened recently was the finalization of Nord Stream 2, which was possible also because the US gave up on the sanctions for the finalization of construction in summer. And now the question is whether this pipeline will become operational or not. At the same time, the Turk Stream has been completed last year, and the construction of its extension inside the EU and the Balkans has also accelerated recently. So right now, there is technically a possibility to almost completely bypass Ukrainian transit. What happens is that for the moment, Nord Stream 2 is not allowed to operate, and Gazprom is seeking to justify the necessity of opening this pipeline soon, saying that unless this pipeline is used, then there are some technical issues why the Ukrainian transit is not so reliable anymore. And this actually fuels the price increases that we are seeing recently. We saw in recent months a lot of not only price increases, but also very high volatility of prices. So, for example, when Gazprom said that they are going to start putting more into their European storage, the prices went immediately down. Or when there was a technical problem on the transit in Belarus, the prices went immediately up. So I think this is also being used as a geopolitical pressure to speed up the approval of Nord Stream 2. What we have seen recently is that in what stage is this pipeline? You know that the European rules say that a gas pipeline should be not controlled by a particular supplier. It should be used or accessible by any kind of third-party supplier without any kind of discrimination. Nord Stream 2 is incorporated as a subsidiary in Switzerland and has asked to be certified as an operator for the transmission pipeline in Germany by setting up a subsidiary there. What is happening is that and we saw that last week, the German regulator has asked to see first that all the paperwork has been finalized and that the subsidiary meets all the prerequisites of the EU energy directives so that it can get the operation rights. I think what we are discussing here is about whether the European Union and the European member states are going to fully implement their own rules, or if they are going to bypass their own rules just because they are fearing not to have a discontinuation of gas supply. And right now we are in a sort of a standoff in which we have a choice. Either we agree not to follow our own rules, and then Gazprom can threaten to discontinue supply, or we follow our own rules, and I think that should be a better option because it shows commitment to respecting the rules. One thing which is very important. So right now there was no reason why the gas supplies to Europe should have declined in recent months. What happened was that the supply to Europe, Gazprom has respected all its contracts by supplying gas to its consumers so far, only from its storage inside the European Union, in Germany in particular. So they have reduced substantially the piped gas while depleting the gas storage in Europe. And right now what happens is that the actual supply of gas that is available for this winter in Europe is actually lower than it should have been. And this is one of the reasons why the prices are getting higher. There is no justification why the gas supply cannot be increased faster if the transit network through Ukraine is being used, because that capacity is more than enough to supply all the gas needs that are currently in Europe. So there is practically no reason for the crisis except the willingness of Gazprom to push for this fast approval of Nord Stream 2, and we shouldn't give in. One thing that we must be fully aware of is the fact that, yes, individually, if you take each consumer or each member state, it is very dependent on Gazprom, particularly in our region. But if the whole EU acts in a solidary manner, then Gazprom is as dependent on the EU as we are on Gazprom, each one of us. So I think it's very important that we show solidarity and we show true commitment for following our own rules, and it will be okay. Let's stop here, and then I'll take the questions later on.
Thank you very much, Ms. NUţU, for all the interesting points you raised regarding this energy crisis. And now we move to Professor Natalia PISKULOVA from Russian Federation. She is chair of International Economic Relations and Foreign Economic Affairs at the Moscow State Institute of International Relations. She holds a PhD in economics and is the author of more than 100 articles and books. And today we are very grateful that she will talk about the impact of the EU Green Deal on the relations between EU and Russia. Please, Professor Piskulova, you have the floor.
About microphone. I forgot to switch it on. Thank you very much. Actually, the main subject of my presentation is not exactly gas prices and that kind of problems. It's about, I'm economist, and it's about energy transition and the impact of the Green Deal on the relationship of the European Union and Russia. First of all, several words about energy transition. It's a transformation of the energy system from the use of fossil fuels as the main sources of energy to alternative ones, renewables, hydrogen, etc., etc. And I would like to stress that it's an objective process of the technological development. And whether there is policy or not, it will gradually develop anyway. But the climate policy, as we all know, a policy to combat greenhouse gas emissions, is a policy to accelerate energy transition. As before, the previous energy transitions were accelerated, for example, by transnational oil companies, etc., etc. So, why it's so important? Because energy sector is responsible, accounts for 3/3 of energy of all greenhouse gas emissions. That's why it's so important to transform energy sector. And all countries, as we all know, which have clout in the world economy, have set these goals. More than 170 countries set goals, have goals for renewables, and about 50 countries for hydrogen. Countries with zero emission targets by the middle of the century account now for more than 70% of emissions. So it's objective, and it is accelerated by climate policy of many countries in the world. Now we don't speak if it will be or not. It is gaining momentum. It needs many investments, huge investments actually. They are estimated for energy transition from 70 trillion to 130 trillion of dollars, according to different estimates. It's more than the modern global economy. But in the last 10 years, these investments have doubled. So when we want to see the future of the world economy, we should study investments. Where do they go? If they go to other sources of energy, so that will be the other economy. That will be the picture of our future economy. And as we all know, renewables became the cheapest source of energy. And maybe that means the new estimates say that maybe we need less investments to transform the global economy. And the US very ambitious climate policy is more ambitious than any other policy in the world, in the form of the new Green Deal, will have impact not only on the European Union, but also on economy and foreign trade of its economic partners, due to the decline in imports of energy-intensive, of carbon-intensive products. In the next decade, it will have greatest impact on coal imports, and after 2030 to oil and gas imports. The CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, is one of the mechanisms to offset the costs of the European producers to reduce emissions. And the problem is that, global investments, just a second. The problem is that, actually it's not a problem, but the views of the European Union and Russia on the deal and CBAM are not all the same. Actually, the main view on the Green Deal of the European Union is to gain competitiveness of the European companies and eliminate so-called carbon leakage, as well as reduce the European dependence on imports of a significant share of raw materials from one country. And considering the fact that it's a very expensive policy, it may be a very important CBAM, maybe important source of income, and it will help to accelerate the recovery from the COVID recession. And one more reason is to helping to force other countries to intensify climate policy. Russian view on CBAM, on the deal and CBAM, is that it is designed completely to gain new competitive advantage of the European companies. Political considerations, increasing independence from foreign supplies, switching to products produced in Europe, especially considering the fact that Russia accounts for almost half of the gas imports and 25% of oil imports, of petroleum, oil, and from all trading partners and correspondingly gas partners. The other reason, it's the same source of income, and Russia points out usually on the unfair aspects of taxation, because the accumulated greenhouse gas emissions, the share of Russia is only 6%, while the Europe takes the second place in the world, accounting for 22% of global cumulative greenhouse gas emissions. But actually, it doesn't matter what are the approaches of different sides, because the main thing is that now it's a matter of national security, both for Russia and the European Union. And in this sphere, in the climate sphere, lie the interests of both parties. So the main accent should be not on the divergences, but on opportunities, especially given the obvious lack of interaction in other areas. this is one of the few key areas which, if implemented in practice, can become the basis of the positive side of our relationship. The new opportunities lie in gaining new competitive advantages in the world because of the new markets. Climate sphere now is one of the central platforms of competition and championship in the world. So it's the promotion of national interests in the world. Moreover, Green Deal is a big risk for both sides, not only for Russia, but for the European Union as well. The main thing for the European Union is the high cost of its implementation, high consumer prices, and retaliatory measures from other countries, as well as energy security risks. Because when switched to the new sources of energy and to the usage, for example, of electric vehicles, the problem lies in new energy security risks, in depending on imports of some vital materials for the electric vehicles from other countries. For example, for lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles from China. So there will be other countries which the European Union which will be dependent on. So there are new security risks. There are other risks as well, but the main are like that. For Russia, it's only very risky because the main risk lies not only in CBAM, but in loss of markets for energy and carbon-intensive products, and the lag in the restructuring of the energy sector, which is the main sector of any economy in any country, and as well as CBAM payment, which is rather high. And now it is estimated about $6-7 billion of dollars. Yes. But as I said, the most important is to speak about potential, because the Europe itself won't be able to fulfill its climate neutral obligations by itself. It needs, for example, to import hydrogen from Russia, etc., etc., from Russia or any other country, it doesn't matter. So there is good sphere of cooperation, and this cooperation may not be limited by only energy sphere, because energy penetrates to is in every sector of the economy, for example, in transportation, in industry, in agriculture, everywhere. So this cooperation may be in all these spheres, and so it may be called deep cooperation. And as lady, as female, I am for cooperation, actually. Just a few words about factors causing Europe's current, sorry, it's not my my topic, but still, I'd like just to mention some other reasons for this crisis, because several were very well named, but there are some more reasons. It's always a matter of supply and demand. And from the demand side, it's the economic recovery after COVID. But from the supply side, it's the temporary decrease in, for example, in wind power production in Europe, and limited gas supplies, maybe I missed it, from Norway, for example, because of maintenance issues. The shutdown of Algerian pipeline, which supplies gas to Spain, first of all. Then it was, you mentioned the higher gas consumption in last winter due to cold weather, and high prices in spring and summer discouraged traders from buying gas and to sell it later. High demand in Asia, which accumulated supplies from other regions as well, including Russia and the US, by the way. I think you mentioned it, it's the reliance of the European Union on spot markets. The problem is that Europe tries to switch to buying gas from spot markets, but the problem is that to supply gas through pipelines needs huge and long-term investments. That's why the buyer can't permit itself to not to rely on long-term contracts, and that is the objective reason. That's why maybe, you know, as you mentioned, Gazprom is fulfilling its long-term contracts, and European companies confirm contractual obligations had been met. And one more reason, the European Union before end of October and November had not asked more supplies from Russia, by the way. And Russia as well was replenishing its own domestic stock. But returning to the Green Deal and climate policy, I think it's wrong to blame the European Union focus on renewable energy. The energy transition is still objective and is still very important to combat climate change. Thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you, Professor Piskulova, for your insightful presentation, especially regarding the opportunities for cooperation between the European Union and Russia on the green transition. May I remind the attendees of our webinar that they can use the chat box to address their questions for our panelists. And now allow me to invite Mrs. Victoria Roșa from Republic of Moldova to take the floor. Mrs. Roșa is an international relations expert, member of the Foreign Policy Association, and previously she served as a security and defense and EU affairs advisor to the Moldovan Prime Minister. Mrs. Roșa is also a member of the ESEE-Fanel network. Please, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Anna Maria, first of all, for this very interesting discussion, which is now in the top of preferences, I would say. And of course, thank you very much, Professor Liliana Popescu, for inviting me to take part in this network, which I consider to be a great advantage for all of us. First of all, because we have the possibility to communicate and to cooperate among each other, which is not less important in nowadays. As we are talking today about the energy security, I would like to focus my presentation on the energy security of the Republic of Moldova. And of course, following the European energy crisis, Moldova found itself, as many other countries in the region, in a difficult situation, as the lack of energy security policies have posed considerable risk on the energetic functionality of our country. At present, Moldova is facing severe energy harassment, I would say, harassment approaches, if we can tell in this manner, from the part of the Russian Federation, which in this way is showing its attitude towards the new political realities in Chisinau, following the early parliamentary election won with a majority by the pro-Western oriented political party. The newly elected government, in its first 100 days, had to face a major energy crisis, and it is still facing it, even though an understanding was reached with the Russian counterparts. But if we will take it step by step, all actually leads to the Soviet era, when the energy infrastructure was constructed in such a way that the energy system of the former Moldovan Soviet Socialist Republic was dependent on critical infrastructure, which was placed in the Transnistrian region, which we know that today it is a secessionist region, and which actually considers also a conflict in the Republic of Moldova, and we are in the process of settling this secessionist protracted conflict. And if we're talking about infrastructure, then I will have to mention the largest power plant, Moldovan State Regional Power Station, Kuchurgan Power Station, also known under the Russian acronym of MGRES. 6 out of 7 interconnection points between Moldova and Ukraine of high voltage lines, 4 of these lines being tied up in a transformer substation on the territory of MGRES. Out of 5 entry points of gas transmission pipelines of regional importance, including all 3 entry points of the Trans-Balkan pipeline system, and of course the main gas compressor station on the Trans-Balkan pipeline system between Ukraine and Bulgaria, located near Tiraspol, the administrative center of the Transnistrian region. By 1992, actually, the energy security of the Republic of Moldova almost entirely was dependent on Russia and its proxy regime in the Transnistrian region. The gas price has long been used by Russia as a political tool in promoting its foreign policy in the country, largely dependent on Russian gas. The supply of Russian gas to both Moldova and the Transnistrian region has been carried out under contracts signed by Gazprom with Moldova Gas. Under such a contractual scheme, the gas debt of the separatist region is accumulated at first glance by the Moldovan side, this becoming a great issue for debate and discussion. Actually, this was possible due to the fact that Transnistria's gas infrastructure was included in the capital of the Moldovan gas supplier under the pretext of paying the gas debt. Thus, Gazprom supplies gas to Moldova Gas, while the latter supplies gas to Moldovan consumers and to Tiraspol Transgas from the Transnistrian region. De jure, Tiraspol Transgas being a subsidiary of Moldova Gas, but de facto its assets were somehow nationalized by the separatist authorities, and practically Moldova has no authority over there. Currently, the outstanding amount owed by Moldova Gas to Gazprom at the end of 2019 totaled at over $7 billion. And although Gazprom mentions in all its financial reports that the Transnistrian region does not pay for gas consumption and it leads to the increase of Moldova's gas debt, gas supply to the region still continues under the same scheme. We have to mention here that no political leader has ever recognized the Transnistrian region gas debt, this being an issue for further discussion. Throughout the years, Moldova was ruled by parties of different geopolitical orientation. Since its incorporation in 1998, Moldova Gas remained a dangerous territory for control bodies because they were actually not let in. Gazprom, along with Moldovan decision makers, throughout the years tolerated and even facilitated fraudulent schemes in the energy sector to the detriment of the national interest of Moldova. It was largely understood that malign influence can only be countered by consolidating Moldova's energy security and eliminating dependency on critical energy infrastructure controlled by Russia via its Transnistrian proxies. However, little has been done in this respect since 1991, despite the fact that the need for diversification has been acknowledged and even included in all energy strategies through the years. At present, we have to mention that the Gavrilidze government recognized that the country's asymmetric dependence on external providers on energy sources is another source of risk for the stability of the supplies and price predictability. Although several interconnection projects with the European energy systems are underway, they are advancing too slowly in order to ensure Moldova's energy security. Actually, in order to overpass the crisis moment that Moldova is facing still now, for the first time, the Moldovan government opted for diversifying its energy supplier, agreements with Polish providers being reached, actually. But this does not necessarily mean ensuring energy security in a longer term. The authorities in Moldova are aware that only by conducting an overall audit of Moldova Gas and ensuring a proper regulatory framework and infrastructural conditions for gas diversification, we can start the discussion on initiating the process of energy security in general for the country. An important role in this process actually relies on Moldova's neighbors, Romania and Ukraine. This is why I do believe that a trilateral dialogue should be actively explored, since here we have a real geostrategic knot, the NATO and EU border, of course, the Danube and the Black Sea. In fact, this is where East meets West from geopolitical point of view and energetical as well. The energy security discussion brought to the attention also the issue of green policies in Moldova. And we have to admit that considerable assistance from the part of the European Union has been granted to Moldova for energy diversification projects. Nevertheless, only when Maia Sandu, the president of the Republic of Moldova, the current president of the Republic of Moldova, took office, the green policies and the energy diversification topic became publicly discussed and awareness was raised. By presenting her vision on the Moldovan foreign policy, President Sandu emphasized the role of Moldova, which should take an active engagement in finding solutions and contributing to global environment challenges. This is how President Sandu sees also the role of Moldova as a contributor to the EU policies and EU security as such. Definitely, when we are talking about energy security, there are a lot of issues that we have to tackle, and also we have to talk about the ownership that the Moldovan political elites, but also authorities, have to take in order to fight the corruption in institutions, but also in elaborating policies that would allow talking about energy security for the Republic of Moldova. Of course, collaboration and cooperation is the key word, because indeed Republic of Moldova has to seek potential ways to discuss with Russian Federation, even though it will be difficult. But again, here we have to talk about the mutual interest partnership. We have to talk about respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. And of course, if all of this will be respected, then indeed we can talk about a partnership between Republic of Moldova and Russia in terms of energy supplies and energy security. But again, all the talks have to have as main standing point the respect for the sovereignty, the independence, and the territorial integrity of Moldova. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Roșa, for the perspectives presented on the energy security of Republic of Moldova. And now we move to another regional perspective from the Western Balkans this time. I invite Mrs. Nevena ŠEKARIĆ from Republic of Serbia to take the floor. Mrs. ŠEKARIĆ is a PhD candidate at the University of Belgrade and a research associate at the Institute of International Politics and Economics in Belgrade. She is also a member of the ESEE-Fanel network. Please, Mrs. ŠEKARIČ, you have the floor.
Thank you, Anna Maria, and many thanks also to Professor Liliana for the possibility to allow one female PhD candidate from small Balkan country to speak with all those distinguished ladies today on this topic. And I would just like to share my PPT with you now. Okay. So since you already introduced me, I would just like to, in the next 10 minutes, try to map the position of the Western Balkans when it comes to energy within the European Union. So the best way to highlight Western Balkan energy perspective is to understand the energy context of the Western Balkan countries. Lying between East and West energy routes, the Western Balkans has very specific energy environment, often called as a non-integrated part of Europe. This region consists of EU member state Croatia, candidate states Serbia, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Albania, and potential candidates as well as Bosnia and Herzegovina. And just a quick notion here, I would like to see Croatia as a part of this region today due to its deep political, historical, economic, and energy relations with all other Western Balkan countries that are still not part of the European Union. Traditionally, energy infrastructure within this region is very old and is using large reserves of fossil fuels while simultaneously being dependent from some external energy importers. The specific energy context of the Western Balkans is also tackled by the fact that those countries are simultaneously part of the energy community, committed in that sense by the alignment of their national energy policies with the European acquis in domain of energy, and additionally fulfillment of those diverse energy criteria affect their EU accession process. Beside the European Union, other main energy players within this part of Europe are certainly Russia and in recent years, People's Republic of China. Diverse energy mix of the Western Balkans is actually the result of different energy needs of those countries. But the primary Western Balkan energy sources are actually derived from solid fossil fuel, primarily also in first line from lignite and coal, from natural gas, oil, and to some although little extent from renewable energy sources, where wind, solar, and hydropower energy being the principal renewables in the Western Balkans. But the biggest challenge for those countries is the fact that coal-fired power plants presenting main energy source in Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia, North Macedonia, and Montenegro, around 65 to 70% of electricity is produced actually from coal-fired power plants. And notwithstanding the global issues associated with CO2 emissions, investments in those regional coal-fired power plants continue to be made. However, the current relatively low cost of energy produced by those plants is expected to increase as EU candidate countries are required to harmonize their legislation with EU laws, which include, among others, a system of higher tariffs for heavy carbon emission facilities due to climate, health, and environmental concerns. So aging energy infrastructure and carbon-intensive energy supply make this region actually one of the greatest pollutants in Europe. This state of the art, in combination with depletion of lignite and coal resources and EU environmental regulations, created very challenging environment for fast energy transition for those countries in the future. And setting aside the consumption of oil and lignite and coal as still dominant resources, the Western Balkan countries are highly dependent on Russian oil and gas, which actually make Russia main energy supplier and dominant energy actor in this part of Europe. Although those countries have different share of gas in their total energy consumption, many of them, as I already started, are entirely dependent from importing Russian gas, with some exceptions of, for instance, Croatia, that is producing significant amounts of its own gas. Besides, Russian companies control oil refineries in Serbia and Bosnia. Generally speaking, in addition to Western Europe, Central and Eastern Europe represent a very important energy market for Russia. According to official Gazprom export data, with exports reaching almost 40 billion cubic meters during the last year, Russian gas provides more than half of the region's gas consumption, and a significant part of these exports goes to meet the needs of the Western Balkans. And here you can see that Croatia and Serbia are being the leaders of importing Russian natural gas. Significantly smaller quantities go to Bosnia and Herzegovina and North Macedonia, but having in mind that although those are very small energy markets, almost entirely gas imports are coming from Russia Federation. When it comes to energy, when it comes to European Union as one of the main energy actors in this part of Europe, it is the fact of being members of energy community is crucial when it comes to the financing, technical support, and development of the Western Balkan energy supply and distribution network. This energy community imposes some legal implementation and logistical criteria for EU accession from the energy standpoint. And as you can see, according to the latest annual report of energy community, when it comes to the Western Balkan countries, in this table you can see the state of the implementation of the provisions governing some energy areas, which shows different degrees of those fulfillment. And here, if we notice only the Western Balkan countries, Montenegro being the leader in achieving some success, while, for instance, Serbia and North Macedonia stayed at the level of the last year. So when it comes to the Western Balkans countries, the EU has been the major investor so far with its main instruments such as direct and indirect financial assistance through grants, EU programs, loans from the European Investment Bank and European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And this money is raised through the projects of energy community interest and the projects of mutual interests, and refers to infrastructure projects that meet the general and specific area. And considering that the Western Balkan countries are members, as I already said, of the energy community, which promotes energy security by encouraging them to adopt EU energy rules, EU funding finances energy infrastructure such as new interconnecting electricity cables and gas pipelines. Geopolitics energy nexus in the context of the Western Balkan regions could be seen in this picture, where you can see 3 European Union energy corridors that are actually overlapping across the territory of the Western Balkan region. And last but not least, in recent years, China, People's Republic of China's emerging as a kind of a new energy actor, but mainly through its energy investments. And my colleague and I conducted research on China's economic involvement in the energy sectors of the 17+1 initiative, although it now exists as a 16+1 initiative once again. And in this table, you can see results when it comes to the Western Balkan countries, noting that research actually was conducted last year, so some of the numbers could be slightly changed. Here are the numbers of the energy projects in listed countries, and project status indicating the energy subsectors in the breaks. So here, actually, we could saw different factors that are shaping the Western Balkan energy markets. Western Balkan countries are actually, in this kind of a sense, torn between East and West, between long-term green European green policies and short-term and middle-term supplying energy needs. And many of those energy actors with overlapping energy interests present very challenging environment for the Western Balkan states. Current energy crisis also reflected also reflected on those countries. For instance, Serbia launched a crisis plan in October while waiting for Russia's response on the new gas prices, and in the next 2 days, President Putin and President Vučić actually should meet to discuss this topic. Serbia also froze the electricity prices in November as kind of a short-term measure. North Macedonia and Albania declared the energy crisis, emergency situation in the energy sector, which is very important. Where it's very important to bear in mind that they are highly dependent from importing electricity while not having enough strategic reserves in situations coupled with possible energy disruptions. So current energy situation, possible energy price increases coupled with already present economic problems that came as a COVID-19 consequences are currently shaping energy situation within the Western Balkan countries. And this balancing between East and West is kind of an endemic characteristic for this region, where energy is being just one of the domain where this place occurs still. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. ŠEKARIĆ for the interesting presentation on the Western Balkans perspective on energy security. We now open the Q&A section, and allow me to invite Professor Liliana Popescu, the host of this webinar and the founder of the ESEE-Fanel network, to say a few words and address her questions. Please, Professor Popescu.
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry that because of a technical problem, I could not enter with the camera, but I followed very carefully and attentively everything that was said, and I think it is very interesting and a very rich contribution that you all have to this discussion. And of course, I have a question for everybody who would like to answer, of course. Precisely because, you know, politicians in all our countries, they are mainly males. Maybe, I mean, Serbia here is privileged, it has a woman prime minister, but otherwise, I would say that in our countries, males are prevailing in terms of politicians. So my question is, what would you advise the politicians in your country to do in order to move on and exit the energy crisis, and at the same time contribute to environmental security in the region? And thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Professor Popescu, for the question. Who would like to answer this very intriguing question, I may say? Whoever likes to jump in.
Yeah, if you allow me, I will start, because actually Professor Popescu has raised a very important question, because we are talking about local authorities, but also politicians at the central level and the national authorities. And there should be a great nexus between them when we are talking about energy security, but also infrastructural projects. And here also comes the importance of the people themselves, of the citizens, and how do they perceive the energy security. If I'm talking from the perspective of the Republic of Moldova, I think that actually we haven't been talking about issues of energy security with a larger population. This is why this topic now is not very much understood, and even the energy crisis is not so much understood by the population at large. This is why I think that it is very important first for the central but also regional authorities to start talking about energy efficiency, to start talking about energy security, but also engage the people in the communities in order to become to have energy efficient policies, but also to have people taking stock of what the authorities are doing, and of course to make them more accountable in both in regions, in communities, but also at the national level. Also, if I'm speaking about Moldovan perspective, I think that when we are talking about energy security, it involves a larger agenda, the anti-corruption agenda, because we are talking about institutions, we are talking about governmental institutions which need to be restructured, which need to be made accountable for all the decisions, but also the policies that they are undertaking. And this is a very long-term process. This will not happen overnight. And this is why I think that the process actually started in Moldova. We see a great commitment and engagement from the part of the authorities, be it the parliament, the government, or the presidential office, when we talk about anti-corruption, but we also see their important role in facing the energy crisis. But at the same time, this has to be complemented additionally with the support of the citizens. And here An important issue is disinformation and the propagandistic messages that we have to face. So this is another issue that comes in a nexus, in a connection with the with actually the crisis, the energetical crisis that we are facing. And this is not the case only of Moldova. This is the case for many other countries in the European Union as well, because when we are talking about fake news, disinformation, and energy security is not an issue that is overpassed of this phenomena. Unfortunately, we have to think about strategies, how to fight them together. But this, first of all, means that the political class has to be accountable. It has to cooperate with the population, but also engage the population. And at the same time, we need to have an informed and aware population, aware citizens who would be able to control the authorities, but also to punish them in case that they are not taking the right decisions for the interest of the country and the interest of the citizens themselves.
Thank you, Ms. Roșa. Yes, Nevena, please.
Thank you. I would agree with Ms. Victoria. I think that this is actually a marathon battle, but a battle that is really necessary. I mean, I come from a country where pollution from energy sources is extremely evident, and I think that almost every week, citizens and people from Serbia are actually organizing public protests, and I think that the awareness of the necessity of introducing clean energy technologies are raising among those people, because energy, if we look at longer terms, energy per se, of course, is very crucial and important, but it does not mean so much if not referring to environmental and health issues.
Thank you very much. Ms. NUţU, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think what we need right now is a little bit of reason, and we all have this temptation. It's not only inside the EU, outside the EU. Of course, we are a little bit taken by surprise by such developments like the current energy crisis, and there is a pressure from the society to respond quickly to this challenge without thinking properly ahead. So I think there has been a lot of ad hoc policy making and crisis response for this energy price crisis, and maybe the decisions have not been taken with the proper consideration of everything that is involved. And we should take into account what would be the consequences in the long run. So, for example, in most cases, the response has been to find some ways quickly to cap the prices to households without thinking about what impact this could have on the supply, on the domestic production, and so on. And I think there is a need for a better consultation with all the stakeholders when we are making such policy choices. Probably the COVID crisis and the current energy crisis will change a lot of thinking inside the EU and inside each of the member states. So, for example, we need to think carefully now with the experience of what could happen in the case of a supply shock in energy. How do we provide some better regulations to ensure, I don't know, that we have a higher level of underground storage for gas, or what types of contracts would be better suited? These are probably not related only to energy, but maybe for other sectors as well. I mean, last year we saw that this tendency to externalize all the industrial production to China may have not been the best solution if you have a crisis that affects all the transport, international transport routes. So I think there will be a lot of thinking that needs to be done. Energy is not the only one. But I also think that Europe should learn a lot from both the Western Balkans and from the former USSR countries in terms of how to deal with monopolies in energy supplies. One of the problems that we have now with the gas crisis is actually a problem that Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia, and other countries have experienced for a number of years, and they have suffered a lot from the past. One optimistic lesson that can be learned is that after each of these crises, each of these countries have emerged a little bit stronger, and I think we should do the same. So, for example, I think at least in terms of energy security, Ukraine is much better now than it was before 2014. It has managed to, improve its energy efficiency tremendously. I mean, it consumes only half of the energy that it used to consume in 2014. It has diversified its supply. It has tremendously enhanced governance in its energy sector. So, for example, it no longer has the dubious contracts that it used to have with certain large energy consumers, which were benefiting cheap energy supplies from state-owned companies. So in the end, those are the types of lessons that we should learn from, even inside the EU.
Thank you, Mrs. NUţU. I would invite Professor Piskulova if she has any comments on this question, please. You are muted. We cannot hear you.
That's it. Just a few words to add. I just wanted to say that climate change is a common problem. We're all in a small planet, and we don't have any other planet. And the thing is that we have to solve the problem. And it's no good of dividing something. It's a matter of, I told it and I repeat it once more, it's a matter of cooperation. And we should jointly move to a greener planet and to a cleaner planet from not only from greenhouse gas emissions view, but right now it's the major problem. And the better thing is to find common ground for us. That's why I'm for cooperation in the energy and any other sphere to solve common problems. They're big problems, and not try to. It's natural that every country wants to solve its own problems. It's natural, but still we have more common than divergences. And once again, cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Piskulova. So we understood from these discussions that energy security is an important issue and it's affecting all of our region. And as we all agreed, green transition is also impacting the energy crisis. But I would like to build on more security-related areas, and I would raise the question of how are the current situation in Ukraine and in Belarus affecting the discussions about the energy transition and energy crisis and the relations between European Union and Russia and the possible negotiation on energy crisis? Who would like to address this this question. I think it's on all of our minds, and maybe Ms. Roșa, with your background on security.
Yes, I will mention something, because I think that actually this is a very important topic. In general, the Eastern European region is very much interlinked, and everything that happens here somehow has an impact on each country individually. And as we know, Republic of Moldova, but also Ukraine, have already mentioned their European civilizational choice, having an association agreement in place. That means that the two countries have commitments that they have to undertake, including commitments that refer to energy security as such. So this is why, of course, everything that happens in Ukraine and the relationship that the Russian Federation has with Ukraine has a direct impact on the Republic of Moldova, also taking into account that we do have a frozen conflict on our territory, again, where Russia has a double role, a role of mediator in the 5+2 format of negotiation, but as well a role in maintaining the foreign troops on the territory of the Republic of Moldova in the Transnistrian region, thus violating the neutrality status of Moldova. So when we are talking about the role of Russia, here Russia has many roles that we have to take into account when we are talking about the situation, the security architecture in the Eastern European region. This is why everything is interconnected, and when we are talking about cooperation, as the distinguished professor has mentioned, we also have to take into account that this cooperation has to have on its basis the mutual respect between the partners, and only then I think that we can find common ground in order to solve the problem that exists and that affects all of us, and this is absolutely clear. So of course the question you raised is very important. There is only one answer. Of course, it impacts. And we see that the crisis that the energy crisis that Moldova faced also was generated because of the fact that there is no transition through Ukraine, and this is somehow putting Moldova in a situation that they have, that it has to find alternatives for gas. And here I must mention Romania, which actually is a saver for the Republic of Moldova. And today we have the visit of our President Maia Sandu and our Foreign Minister Nicu Popescu in Bucharest, actually happening now. And discussing potential cooperation in terms of also ensuring energy security for the Republic of Moldova. And actually this the situation that happened in the region and the relationship between Russia and Ukraine also made Republic of Moldova think about diversification of electricity and gas supplies and infrastructure. And actually we must say that since early October 2021 we have gas supply diversification due to the Iași-Ungheni-Chișinău interconnector, which is very, very important for Moldova, because this means that in case of crisis, we will have another crisis, we will have a short-term alternative. Right, which does not actually make the problem disappear, but at least it gives Moldova an opportunity to see other alternatives for a period of time and to ensure the needs of the population. So I will repeat myself again. I think that the relationship that Russia has with each country in particular does have an impact. And unfortunately, we cannot talk only about cooperation and common grounds without solving the deeper issues and the deeper conflicts that exist, which have a geopolitical tint, unfortunately. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roșa. If any other panelists want to add something? If not, I will invite Professor Popescu to add a few words to this discussion.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you for moderating this very interesting event. where various viewpoints were displayed. I think that this kind of event can lay the ground for further discussions in this area. What I take from this discussion is, first of all, that we need to start from our care and concern with the environment. And at the same time, we need to start from the legitimate interests of each actor involved and recognize them. I think if we take these two benchmarks, it may be a constructive discussion, and we may find appropriate policies for each of our countries or entities like European Union, because Romania is Romania, but also part of the European. So I think that yes, if we take into account the common concern for a clean environment and the legitimate interests of the parties involved, I think we may lay the ground for constructive discussions and policies. I thank very much to all participants and for all the opening that you displayed, because I know this is not an easy discussion, given that the crisis is under, is just going on. But I think that we need, and politicians need, this kind of opening. And perhaps if more women were involved in negotiations at every level, and including at the very high international level, I think that we may have better results. I'm not going to get into this topic, but this is a topic discussed in the framework of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 regarding women, peace and security. I think women need to be more involved in politics and in international negotiations. Thank you very much for participating in this event. I'm going to let my colleague Anna to say the last words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Popescu, for the concluding ideas of our webinar. Allow me to thank the panelists of our today's webinar for their time and the insightful presentations and the ideas discussed. We also thank the participants for their questions and for being with us here today to discuss such an important topic. I would like to personally thank my colleagues from the Eastern and Southeastern Europe panel network for their support in organizing the event. And we invite you to follow our website and our Facebook page. I posted in the chat section the links to them in order to stay connected with us and follow our future events and activity. Goodbye, thank you, and stay safe.
Thank you very much. All the best.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.